Library for inviting me to come and talk with you. The subject of my presentation is public history in the Upper Cumberland. I'm going to describe my subject by sharing a few projects that I've done and try to demonstrate how culture influences our present and can be used to define our future. And if you'll please hold any questions till the end, I'll be happy to try and answer them then. I do want to start with a shout out for America 250. On July 4th, we'll celebrate America's semi-quincentennial. I'll be dedicating a lot of my time this year to programming related to America's 250th birthday. And I'm sure some of you have already, but I recommend watching Ken Burns' program on the American Revolution to get primed for America 250. Also, this month marks 100 years since Dr. Carter G. Woodson launched what would become Black History Month. The centennial theme is a century of Black history commemorations. I'm working with Mickey Gwynn, the director of the Black History Museum of Warren County, Tennessee, to profile Mr. Carl Rowan on the next episode of Soul of Warren County. A naval officer, award-winning journalist, and a pioneer in the field of public diplomacy, Rowan's one of the most outstanding citizens in Upper Cumberland history. And our discussion of his life and career will appear later this month on Ben Lomond Connect on YouTube. We want to honor Mr. Rowan and celebrate 100 years of Black History Month. Just some background, I work for the Upper Cumberland Development District, which is a quasi-governmental entity created by our state legislature in 1969 to provide technical assistance to local governments across Tennessee. Our district serves over 348,000 people. The region we serve includes 14 counties and over 5,000 square miles. This area is an outdoor enthusiast paradise with lakes, federally protected land, and state parks and natural areas in nearly every county. We have picturesque town squares and a diverse history. The Upper Cumberland is also poverty-stricken, with roughly half of our communities listed as either distressed or at risk by the Appalachian Regional Commission, but we are making strides. My historic preservation contract is with the Tennessee Historical Commission. This is the Clover Bottom Mansion in Nashville, which is the state office of the THC. My work includes preparing nominations to the National Register of Historic Places and applying for National Park Service grants to restore National Register properties. I have focused on adaptive reuse of National Register sites for educational programming and heritage tourism. I work with local, state, and federal government, historical societies, nonprofits, chambers of commerce, businesses, and individual citizens, basically everybody, to preserve, promote, and celebrate the Upper Cumberland's unique cultural resources. A lot of the work that a preservation planner does revolves around the National Register of Historic Places. The National Register is the United States government's official list of districts, sites, buildings, structures, and objects deemed worthy of preservation. The following projects I'm going to show you are federal historic preservation grants from the National Park Service made available to each state through their respective historical commissions. The purpose of these grants is to restore properties that are already listed on the National Register. The second oldest operating courthouse in Tennessee, Clay County's courthouse, has been the center of that community's civic, political, and social life since Reconstruction. Cordell Hull, the longest tenured Secretary of State in American history, father of the United Nations, and Nobel Peace Prize recipient, grew up in the Willow Grove community of Clay County. He was appointed circuit court judge at age 32 and held court in that courthouse. He was pleased that even after he retired as Secretary of State, people in his hometown still called him judge. I worked with Clay County to bring the building's electrical system up to code and make it safe for their public events. And I've done several other grants there to restore and replace their historic courthouse windows. The E.O. Smith House is the oldest residence in Gainesboro, which is my hometown. It's also known as the Gaines House and the Van Hooser House. There's been heightened interest in the site after they uncovered evidence that the home was used as a makeshift Civil War hospital in 1862. They found surgical instruments, and other items they unearthed in the yard. The foundation of the home was in bad shape and needed to be stabilized. I worked with the town and the nonprofit that owns the home to restore its foundation, and we hired a contractor to do archaeological monitoring during the restoration. This is the A.H. Roberts Law Office in Livingston. The exterior of the office was in danger due to extensive termite and water damage, and we got a grant to work on it. Albert Houston Roberts was a country lawyer, best remembered today as the Tennessee governor who called a special session of the General Assembly to ratify the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, recognizing women's right to vote in the United States. He rented this small office from about 1901 to 1913. Miss Will Harris served as a court reporter and legal secretary to Mr. Roberts during the early 20th century. When Cordell Hull was elected to Congress in 1907, he asked Roberts permission to offer Harris a job in Washington. Roberts didn't want to lose his bright legal assistant, but he didn't want to deprive her of such an exciting career opportunity. So Ms. Harris worked with Cordell Hull for 4 decades during his time in Congress and the State Department. An expert in dictation and transcription, after retiring, she could literally say that she wrote the Atlantic Charter. She got her start in Livingston in its tiny law office. Another restoration project was for the town of Alexandria in DeKalb County. The stone gate entrance to the cemetery had been vandalized, and the roof of the Shea Chapel United Methodist Church needed work to stop interior water damage. The original church on the left here was built in 1868. The present day church on the right was built in 1931. After attending Fisk University in Nashville, W.E.B. Du Bois taught school and attended church at Shea Chapel. His experience there had a significant impact on him and informed his classic, The Souls of Black Folk, a seminal work in American literature. The first African American to earn a doctorate at Harvard, Du Bois was a brilliant writer, historian, and advocate for civil rights. So why is it important to restore and celebrate National Register properties? One reason is economic development. History is a catalyst for economic growth. People are drawn to communities that have preserved a strong sense of historical identity. Tennessee is one of the top 10 heritage tourism destinations in the country, and historic places are 4th on the list of popular destinations. The travel writer Arthur Frommer puts it like this: among cities and towns with no particular recreational appeal, those that preserve the past continue to enjoy tourism. Those that haven't receive almost no tourism at all. Tourists simply won't go to a city or town that's lost its soul. Also, National Register properties connect our community's local histories with important people and events in our national story. People like Cordell Hull and W.E.B. Du Bois, and world-changing events like the Civil War and women's suffrage. It is vital that we preserve National Register properties. They highlight what's unique in each community's history and create places of institutional memory for the future. All history is local history. Everything had to happen somewhere. Now, I want to show you some other projects that highlight grant opportunities separate from the grants that are offered through the Historical Commission. The DeRosset Section House on Bon Air Mountain in White County is the last remaining section house in the country from the era of the Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis Railway. It's on the National Register and currently houses the Bon Air Mountain Historical Society Museum. This project was done through our State Department of Transportation. It was a TAP grant, or Transportation Alternatives Program. These can be used to enhance historic sites which had a transportation purpose. In here it was rail. This project involved making the section house ADA compliant, putting in a paved parking lot, making some aesthetic improvements on the grounds, And a local artist there contributed the statue of a coal miner there at the museum. Middle Tennessee State University's Center for Historic Preservation offers a professional services partnership grant. It did not require a local match, but it did require time and effort from our local partners. For Clay County, we requested technical assistance to develop exhibits to interpret their history in the courthouse. We did multiple site visits there to collect information, create metadata, and scan photographs for the display panels. The theme of the display was flowing through time along the Upper Cumberland, life in Clay County. There were 9 panels total, and we covered Native American heritage, Old Town Salina, the African American Free Hills community and Rosenwald School, the Civil War, Cumberland River, Cordell Hall, and the historic courthouse itself. One of my all-time favorite projects is one that I did during the pandemic here in Cookeville. It was a public-private partnership between American Express and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. They created the Backing Historic Small Restaurants Grant Program as a way to help minority-owned businesses that had been hit hard financially by the pandemic. John's Place actually also got thumped by the tornado that came down 70 right before the pandemic. John's Place is an African-American owned dive bar and restaurant. Cookeville became the unofficial hangout for students of Tennessee Tech University, my alma mater. It was listed on the National Register in 2011 for its contributions to race relations. Our local PBS affiliate, WCTE, produced a documentary about it entitled Everybody's Welcome at John's Place. Since its beginning in 1949, blacks and whites ate and drank together at the restaurant. They didn't make a big deal out of it, but it was unusual at the time. This tradition of social integration predated the legal integration of Putnam County by several years. Another way to get involved in preservation work is to serve on a nonprofit board. For 5 years, I served on the Friends of White Plains, which is a nonprofit dedicated to preserving the historic White Plains property in Allgood here in Putnam County. Allgood purchased White Plains in the spring of 2018, and it has enjoyed a very successful partnership with the Friends Group. White Plains is an ideal venue for community events, living history demonstrations, and experiential learning. It's currently closed for repairs, but I'm working on some grants right now with our partners to try to get it up and running again. Now I want to make just a few examples of how our heritage shapes our region and the things all around us. In Monterey in Putnam County, the mystery of the standing stone predates European settlement. It was a 16-foot monolith in the shape of a dog with its ears up, facing west. It was considered a sacred meeting place for all the tribes in our region. Even the Native American chiefs in the early 19th century did not know its origin. They said, it was there when our fathers' fathers hunted the land. So when Standing Stone State Park was developed in Overton County in the 1930s, it was given the name of the nearby Native American monolith. This is Cordell Hull and Alvin York, recipients of the Nobel Peace Prize and Congressional Medal of Honor, respectively. They were two of 20th century America's most recognized citizens in the challenges of peace and war. They were also born and raised just a few miles apart in Pickett and Fentress counties. And they now have state parks to commemorate their childhood homes, beautiful public lands, I'll sort of go back and forth, dedicated to their memories and the interpretation of their lives. In Pleasant Hill in Cumberland County, that community's history is reflected in Uplands Retirement Village. Uplands represents the legacy of Dr. May Wharton, the doctor woman of the Cumberlands, was her nickname. Her life of charity, hard work, and service to the mountain people there lives on today in the philosophy of Uplands. Preserving the memory of people who serve helps remind us of the importance of service itself. By learning about others, we learn about ourselves. A native of Gainsborough, Clara Jane Cox attended the Nashville College for Young Ladies, obtaining her BA in 1887 and her MA in 1891. She taught school for a couple of years in Dixon Springs and Gainsborough before marrying a mill owner named John Epperson in 1892. They moved to Allgood and built their home, which they named Heart's Ease. Clara started a small public library in Allgood with her own books. A prolific writer, she wrote poetry, short stories, children's literature, historical sketches, feature articles, book reviews, and screen drama. Her work appeared locally in the Putnam County Herald and the Lookout, in the Nashville and Chattanooga newspapers, and she wrote a series of articles about her mother's Civil War experiences. Her poetry reached a wide audience and was published in Will Carleton Magazine, Life, Bob Taylor Magazine, International Poetry Magazine, Progressive Teacher, Southern Woman's Magazine, Tennessee Club Woman, Bridge World, and Christian Herald. During the fugitives' early years at Vanderbilt, they sent Clara their writings for her to criticize. Clara was named Poet Laureate of Tennessee in 1934. After her death in 1937, the city of Cookeville named this library in her honor. Being a literary critic for the fugitives is a pretty good mark on your resume. Granville in Jackson County is a public history case study of a community that was dormant but is now thriving. They use their cultural resources to bring in much needed tourism revenue, celebrating their past to shape their future. Granville now does 8 festivals a year and they average over 40,000 visitors annually. They literally capitalized on nostalgia. Known now as Tennessee's Mayberry Town, they realized they needed to attract tourists who were not necessarily interested in their local history. They highlight that local focus, but they diversified their appeal to bring in more visitors, hence the Mayberry Town. The anchor of that community is the T.B. Sutton Store, where they broadcast one of the top rated bluegrass radio shows in the nation every weekend. In 2022, Granville was listed by the publication Best Life as the #1 small town in the United States that feels like stepping back in time. Now, going back to the economic development, I'm the coordinator of the Cumberland National Scenic Byway. It covers 8 counties. 4 of them are outside of the Upper Cumberland region in East Tennessee. 4 are here. The tagline is from the Cumberland Gap to the Cumberland River. I'm working with WCTE, PBS, our local communities, and state partners to produce a documentary about the byway. I'm just going to play you a couple of little excerpts here, and this is the Cumberland Gap, overlooking the Cumberland Gap in Claiborne County, and the song that plays is Cumberland Gap. Partners is the state tourism. They have a new program called Bike Tennessee, and the Upper Cumberland region has some bike routes if you're a cyclist. This next one is at Standing Stone State Park. It shows the Roleo Marble thing, which has been featured on CBS Sunday Morning and all kinds of other things. It's named for Bud Garrett, local blues musician from the Free Hills community. Bobby Fulcher is when he was still working when we did this. He's since retired, and local musician Cherokee Upton is playing music in this next clip. explain that game to me, which I still don't get. This final one is Thomas Watson, a friend of mine, is the curator of the Clay County Courthouse. He's a retired educator. He and his great nephew are in his antique truck, because as the byway, we want to show not just the destinations, but people actually using the roads in different ways. And so they're tooling down State Route 52, coming into Salina, and then eventually they cross the river where the Cumberland connects with the Obi. And that's the western end of the byway. It terminates at the confluence of those two rivers. This was also Cherokee singing Rocky Top. She was down there singing this song. It was the weekend when UT beat Florida a couple of years ago, so I always remember that. So, we're interested in doing heritage tourism because it brings much needed revenue into communities that may not, become large industrial centers or sites, but they have enormous music, culture, heritage, food, all the things that is what people are trying to, if you're familiar with the real estate market, people are leaving the coast and looking for places where they can sort of be themselves, and where the quality of life is good. So let's see. So why should you get involved in historic preservation and public history in your community? This is an excerpt from the Ephebic Oath, which the young men, and by modern application, the women of Athens had to swear before they could become citizens. I think it's important to have a sense of purpose in your work, and the Athenian Oath helps remind me of the big picture sometimes. So just this part of it says, we will transmit this city not less, but greater, better, and more beautiful than it was transmitted to us. I cannot stress enough the importance of partnerships in doing this kind of work. Whether you are a planner, a chamber director, a citizen volunteer, an elected official, a business leader, or you work for a nonprofit, improving your home, preserving its identity, to create a sense of community and a sustainable economy, leaving it better than you found it, is time well spent. Thank you very much. This, I confess, this whole thing I agreed to so I could come and plug Blazing Saddles. So if y'all don't know who Gabby Johnson is, I'll be happy to answer questions about that. But just all joking aside, if anybody has any questions about anything that I've talked about, I'd be happy to. Yes, ma'am.
I'm not, my mother grew up in Monterey. I've lived here in Cookeville for about 22 years now. I've never heard the term section house before. What exactly is a section house?
On the railway, which Bonaire Mountain in White County, was coal mining. And so that was White County, Cumberland County, Putnam County were railroad towns. And there were section houses where people who lived on the, lived and worked. They actually lived there. So when you go in there, they interpret the history there, but it's actually a home. When you go in there, you can basically see the living quarters and stuff. And like I said, it's the last one extant still standing. My grandmother was from Bon Air, and her family was coal miners, and so I think they have just limited hours where they're open on maybe Saturdays or maybe just a couple of 3 days a week, like a lot of small country museums. But I would recommend going up there because it really is fascinating.
So it just has to do with the railroads?
Yes.
Not like a depot, but it was someplace where somebody lived?
Yeah, it was living quarters.
Okay.
Yeah.
For people that worked in the depot?
Not in a depot, but as people who lived and worked.
It had to do with the railway?
With the railroad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And there was more infrastructure there too, when the rails were a thing, there were, wherever the transportation is that's where life is gonna sort of flourish. And so there'd be lumber mills and sawmills and different things that's they follow the rail. Same way, I'm from Gainsborough, which was a river town. And so, Salina, Gainsborough, Carthage were river towns, but then that shifted to, when in the 20th century, when the highways became the primary. So, but yeah, it's definitely.
I'll try to visit. It's really interesting. I didn't know anything about that.
I
know I pass a sign when I go up that way of a site that's been closed forever. It always says closed on it, that it's something to do about a rock house.
The Rock House is a state historic site, and it's also very interesting, and that is one of the places, very much like White Plains. One thing I didn't mention is there's another scenic byway which Putnam County is part of, called the Walton Road Scenic Byway. It has 4 counties, starts in Carthage, it's Smith County, Putnam County, Cumberland County, and Rome. And White Plains was an important stop on the old Walton Road. Walton Road was an east-west, turnpike. And its eastern terminus, which they've just turned it into a state park, is Fort Southwest Point in Kingston. And it was like a Revolutionary War era, a little bit before that fort. So it really basically starts at the Cumberland River on the square in Carthage, and you've got the Walton Hotel, which they're restoring now. There's a lot of downtown revitalization, restoration of these historic buildings going on, and I'm so glad to see it. There's a planner that I used to follow who used to talk about in the 70s and 80s when they built the soulless, the strip mall type things for businesses, and then they've realized that the heartbeat of all these communities is always going to be its downtown, with the historic courthouses and the old buildings, and you come and repurpose it, and mixed use development and all that stuff. So there's some exciting stuff happening in the Upper Cumberland as far as people recognizing that this heritage tourism and the culture is what we have, and we want to celebrate it.
And when we first moved to this area, we actually moved to Salina. We bought our property from the Watsons, and we lived on Watson Road. So we were
Thomas?
Yeah, so we bought some property from them, and that was an unfinished log home, and we finished it, and later on we moved. I didn't like living that remote, to where it took me like over an hour's drive to get to anywhere, plus to work and back every day. It was just too remote for me. My husband could be a hermit. I couldn't. So we ended up moving. It was my fault we moved. But it was very interesting. There was a lot of interesting places around there, and I wish so much that they did more around that square to preserve the buildings around the square, because they're all so old. And I
Their-
did go
their
to
work-
Rolling Hole, and that was just fascinating because, you know, we grew up playing with marbles when we was a little kid. We just got them in a little bag at the dime store. I didn't ever know that they had anything like that, and they come from states away.
Yeah,
to
internationally,
go to- Yes.
Yeah.
And it was just fascinating.
it is to me too,
So-
and
Is Sierra Hall, is she
She's from-
related to this?
I think she is distantly, yes.
I was wondering about that. We went to a little concert that they had when we first moved there. Like I said, it's been over 20 years ago. When we first moved in that house, and we were just looking around for places to go. And so we went to Cornell Hall, and because they were having some kind of a festival,
Mhm.
and she was playing.
Yeah.
She was just this little girl.
Yeah.
And I
She's-
told my husband, and he's like, his family's all from the north or the east, so none of them are Southerners. And I just looked at him and I said, that kid's gonna grow up and be in the Opry someday, you watch.
Yeah.
Now she's like all over the world,
Yeah,
she's
you
just
were-
amazing.
You were prescient.
She's something else.
Yeah.
She really
Well,
is
and
something
keep
else.
an eye out for my friend Cherokee here because she's
Okay.
playing all over the place right now, and
Okay,
she wrote a song the other day, which I won't get into, but it's sort of a anthem for our current moment that we're
yeah,
in.
those
She's-
local people like that, I wish that they could come out there to Hippie Jacks. You know, the locals that came from all this area, and a lot of my family are, I didn't inherit it, but a lot of them are very musical.
Mhm.
It's just amazing, the family harmony and the banjos and the fiddles and the guitars, and then you would go to, that was just common for family.
That's how
You know,
people
just your
entertain
reunions,
themselves.
everybody was picking and singing under a tree, and
Well, and the
maybe
other
somebody
thing,
was flat-footing somewhere, that was all part of my childhood.
dancing and picking and storytelling.
Mm-hmm,
Because, I mean, this is a storytelling culture. And
Yes.
I came from that background of older people who were storytellers when we were kids, and that's basically how I got started on this path, was hearing them talk about it. And so,
mm-hmm,
especially with all the distractions, that's another thing about the byways. You want kids especially to look up from their screen time and get out and hike and kayak and
yeah,
go through the Cumberland Gap, where not only Daniel Boone and the Europeans, but
Mhm.
the Native Americans thousands of years before them. It's also natural history. There's a fascinating story about how the tectonic plates
Yeah,
move to
there's
create.
lots, yeah. Hmm.
So it's a good opportunity for people to understand where they are in the big scheme of things. And we wanna leave it, like the Ephebic Oath says, we wanna leave it for the next generations that come along.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you, I really enjoyed this, it was,
thank you,
thank
appreciate
you
it.
very much.
Anybody else? Any questions, comments, throwing proof?
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.